They say when you've seen combat, you never really sleep the same again. For me, that wasn't just a saying, it was 40 years of my life. 40 years of staring at the ceiling. 40 years of watching the sun rise through bleary, exhausted eyes. 40 years of hearing my wife say, "Did you sleep at all last night, Jim? My name is James Miller." I served as a combat medic in Vietnam from 1969 to 1971, and I couldn't truly sleep for nearly half my life afterward. This isn't just my story, it's the story of thousands of veterans who came home only to fight another battle in the dark, quiet hours when everyone else is at peace. I remember the exact moment sleep became my enemy. It was during the monsoon season of 1970. Our unit had been pinned down for 3 days in the jungle. The rain was relentless, mixing with mud and blood as I tried to patch up my buddies. There was this kid from Ohio, couldn't have been more than 19, who'd taken shrapnel to his abdomen. I worked on him for hours, but he didn't make it. That night when I finally had a chance to close my eyes, I couldn't. Every time I drifted off, I'd see his face. I'd feel the warmth leaving his body. I'd hear him asking me if he was going to make it home. When I did return to the States in '71, I thought things would get better. I was back in my own bed with my wife beside me in a quiet neighborhood in Pennsylvania. But that first night home, I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, convinced I was back in that jungle. My wife, Sarah, bless her heart, she didn't understand, but she tried. Back then, nobody talked about PTSD. We didn't have a name for what was happening to me. The VA doctors just called it combat fatigue and handed me sleeping pills that either didn't work or left me feeling like a zombie the next day. What most people don't realize about chronic insomnia is that it's not just about being tired. It seeps into every aspect of your life. By 1975, I was working construction, and my crew started noticing I was making mistakes. Dangerous ones. Forgetting safety protocols. Zoning out on the job. My marriage was suffering too. Sarah would say, "Jim, you're not the same man I married," and she was right. I was irritable, forgetful, always on edge. How could I explain that my body was at war with itself? That at night, when the house got quiet, all I could hear were helicopters and gunfire. The worst part wasn't the exhaustion, it was the isolation. While the world slept, I'd sit alone in my living room, watching infomercials at 3 a.m., feeling like the last man on earth. You know what's funny? I got real good at predicting which products would fail in the market. When you watch enough late-night TV, you become something of an expert. By my 50s, my health was deteriorating. My blood pressure was through the roof. I developed type 2 diabetes. My doctor kept saying, "Jim, these conditions are stress-related." What's going on? But I could never bring myself to tell him about the nightmares, about how I hadn't had a full night's sleep since before Richard Nixon was president. In 2005, I hit rock bottom. I had fallen asleep at the wheel and crashed my truck into a ditch. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it was a wake-up call, ironically, since waking up was never my problem. Sarah sat me down that night and said something I'll never forget. "Jim, I'm scared I'm going to lose you. Not to another woman, not to cancer, but to whatever war is still raging inside your head. Please get help." I was 58 years old, and I finally had to admit that I couldn't fight this battle alone anymore. The next day, I walked into the VA hospital and told them everything. About the nightmares, the flashbacks, the way I'd patrols our house 3 times before trying to sleep. How I'd position my bed to face the door, just like we did in the field. The doctor didn't dismiss me this time. She didn't just hand me pills. She looked me in the eye and said, "Mr. Miller, you're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and chronic insomnia. And we can help you." Those words, those simple words, were the first real hope I'd felt in decades. What I learned next changed everything. The doctor explained that as we age, our sleep patterns naturally change. We spend less time in deep, restorative sleep. For most seniors, this is manageable, but for veterans with PTSD, it can exacerbate existing sleep issues. She showed me brain scans, explaining how trauma physically alters the brain's fear response. How my amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear, was essentially stuck in the on position. How my body was pumping out stress hormones at night when it should have been resting. This wasn't weakness. It wasn't all in my head. It was a physiological response to trauma made worse by decades of poor sleep and the natural aging process. For elderly veterans like me, insomnia isn't just about bad dreams. It's about a nervous system that never fully stood down from combats. It's about a brain that learned to associate sleep with danger, with vulnerability. And after years of reinforcing that association, it becomes incredibly difficult to break the cycle. But here's what gave me hope: the brain can change. Even an old brain like mine's. The scientific term is neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections, to heal, to adapt. And that's exactly what I needed to do. My treatment plan wasn't a quick fix. It was comprehensive, what they call a multimodal approach. First came cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. This wasn't like the therapy you see in movies where you lie on a couch and talk about your childhood. This was practical. I learned to identify negative thought patterns about sleep and challenge them. I kept a sleep diary. I practiced relaxation techniques. The hardest part was something called sleep restriction. Counterintuitively, I had to spend less time in bed. No more lying awake for hours. If I couldn't sleep after 20 minutes, I had to get up and do something calming until I felt sleepy again. I also had to follow strict sleep hygiene rules. No more TV in the bedrooms. No caffeine afternoons. Regular bedtimes and wake times even on weekends, which Sarah wasn't too happy about. Then there was the trauma work. I joined a support group for Vietnam vets with PTSD. Sitting in a room with guys who'd been through the same hell, who understood without me having to explain, that was powerful. One veteran, a former Marine named Frank, had been dealing with insomnia for as long as I had. He said something that stuck with me: we were trained to stay alert in dangerous situations. Nobody ever trained us how to feel safe again. Medication was part of the equation too, but not like before. Instead of just knocking me out, these meds were designed to address the underlying issues: the hyperarousal, the nightmares, the depression that had crept in after years of exhaustion. As I got deeper into my treatment, I discovered that elderly veterans have unique needs when it comes to sleep therapy. For one thing, our bodies metabolize medications differently. What works for a 30-year-old vet might be too strong or cause adverse reactions in someone my age. My doctor had to carefully adjust dosages and monitor for interactions with my blood pressure and diabetes medications. Then there's the physical aspect of aging. My back pain, arthritis, and prostate issues all contributed to poor sleep. I needed a more comfortable mattress, a better pillow, and sometimes had to sleep semi-upright to ease my back. The therapy had to be adapted too. Traditional exposure therapy, where you confront traumatic memories head-on, can be too intense for older vets. My therapist used a gentler approach called imagery rescripting, where I could revisit difficult memories but change the outcomes, giving my brain new associations. Technology played a surprising role in my recovery. At first, I was skeptical when my doctor suggested a sleep tracking app. I'm from a generation that fixed cars with wrenches, not computers. But seeing the data, how many times I woke up, how little deep sleep I was getting, made the invisible visible. I could track my progress, see patterns, make adjustments. I also found unexpected help in a weighted blanket Sarah bought me for Christmas. The gentle pressure somehow calmed my nervous system, made me feel secure in a way I couldn't explain. My grandkids joked that Grandpa needed his heavy blankie, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I was falling asleep in less than an hour. Recovery wasn't linear. There were good nights and bad nights. The first time I slept 6 hours straight, I felt like I'd won the lotteries. But then came the anniversary of that night in the jungle, and I was right back to square one, pacing the house at 2 a.m., checking locks, fighting the urge to call my old unit buddies just to make sure they were alive. One particularly rough patch came when a thunderstorm rolled through our town. The sudden cracks of thunder, the flashes of lightning, suddenly I wasn't in Pennsylvania anymore. I was back in Vietnam, and those weren't thunderclaps, they were incoming mortars. Sarah found me in the bathtub, fully clothed, shaking. I was so embarrassed. Here I was, a grown man, a grandfather, hiding from a thunderstorm. But my therapist helped me see it differently. Your body is remembering, she said. That's not weakness. That's your survival instinct doing exactly what it was designed to do. The key was learning not to let setbacks become defeats. After each difficult night, I would return to my routine. I'd practice my breathing exercises. I'd write in my journals. I'd remind myself that healing isn't perfect. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, things began to improve. The nightmares became less frequent. The middle of the night awakenings shorter. I started to feel rested in the mornings, a sensation so foreign I almost didn't recognize it. One of the most powerful aspects of my recovery was reconnecting with other veterans. Not just in therapy groups, but in meaningful ways. I started volunteering at the local VA hospital, talking with younger vets returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. These kids, and to me that's what they were, kids, were experiencing the same sleep issues I had. The same nightmares. The same hypervigilance. Being able to tell them, I understand and it can get better, gave purpose to my suffering. What's more, it reinforced my own recovery. Every time I shared a coping strategy or simply listened to their stories, I was healing a part of myself too. Sarah noticed the change. You're lighter, she said one evening as we sat on the porch. Like you've set down something heavy you've been carrying for years. She was right. By connecting with others who understood, I no longer felt like an alien in my own life. The isolation that had defined my nights for decades was finally breaking. I also found unexpected allies in my battle against insomnia. My granddaughter, a college psychology major, would send me articles about the latest sleep research. My son installed smart lighting in our bedroom that gradually dimmed at night and brightened in the morning, helping to regulate my circadian rhythm. Even my primary care doctor, who had been treating my physical ailments for years without knowing their true cause, became an advocate. He coordinated with my mental health team, adjusted medications that might be interfering with sleep, and for the first time treated me as a whole person, not just a collection of symptoms. Today, at 76, I sleep an average of 6.5 hours a night. Not perfect, but miraculous compared to where I started. I still have my rituals, a cup of herbal tea, my meditation practice, the sound machine that plays gentle rain. I still keep my combat boots by the bed. Some habits are too deeply ingrained to break completely. But now they're a comfort rather than a necessity, a reminder of who I was and how far I've come. The quality of my life has improved in ways I never imagined possible. My blood pressure is under control. My relationship with Sarah is stronger than ever, turns out. Not being cranky from sleep deprivation does wonders for a marriage. I can play with my great-grandchildren without needing a nap afterward. But perhaps the most profound change is internal. For decades, I saw myself as broken, a soldier who couldn't adjust to peacetime. Now I understand that my insomnia wasn't a character flaw. It was an injury as real as any physical wound, and just as deserving of treatment. I've learned that healing is possible at any age. That an old dog like me can indeed learn new tricks. That the human spirit and the human brain are remarkably resilient, even after years of trauma and sleepless nights. If you're a veteran struggling with sleep, or if you love someone who is, please hear me. It doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to spend decades fighting this battle alone like I did. Reach out to your local VA. Talk to a doctor who specializes in sleep medicine or PTSD. Connect with other veterans who understand what you're going through. There are resources available now that didn't exist when I came home from Vietnam: specialized therapies, better medications, support groups, even apps and devices designed specifically for veterans with sleep issues. And if you're an older veteran who thinks it's too late, that you're too set in your ways to change, I'm living proof that's not true. It's never too late to reclaim your nights, to make peace with sleep, to find rest after decades of vigilance. Sleep isn't just about closing your eyes for 8 hours. It's about feeling safe enough to let your guard down. It's about trusting that the world will still be there when you wake up. It's about giving your mind and body the chance to heal, to restore, to prepare for whatever tomorrow brings. I lost 40 years to insomnia, but I gained perspective, resilience, and eventually peace. My hope in sharing this story is that you won't have to lose as many years as I did. That you'll seek help sooner. That you'll understand what took me decades to learn. The war may be over, but the battle for good sleep is one you can win. This is James Miller signing off, and for the first time in a very long time, looking forward to a good night's rest. Thank you for listening to my story.